My truck broke down in a storm, so I ran to pick up my wife at her company party. The valet saw me soaked and tossed a Bentley key at my chest. "Hey, driver, the manager's husband wants the car now. They're going to a hotel." I looked at the key shaking, but I am the husband, and that wasn't my car. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The rain hit my windshield like bullets, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller pieces before the wipers could sweep them away. My old Ford pickup had been making that grinding noise for weeks, but I kept telling myself it could wait until after the holidays. Tonight it finally gave up on me completely, steam rising from under the hood like a white flag of surrender. I pulled over to the shoulder, my hands gripping the steering wheel as the reality sank in. Scarlett was waiting for me at her company's annual holiday party at the Grandview Hotel. She had been talking about this event for weeks, how important it was for her career, how all the executives would be there. I was supposed to pick her up at 9 o'clock sharp. I grabbed my phone and tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. The battery icon showed just 5% remaining. Of course, I sat there for a moment, watching other cars speed past me through the storm, their headlights creating streaks of light in the darkness. The Grandview was only 3 miles away. In this weather, drenched to the bone, it would take me about 40 minutes to walk there. I stepped out into the storm and immediately regretted not bringing a proper coat. The wind cut through my thin jacket like it was made of paper. My work clothes, a simple button-down shirt and khakis, were soaked within the first block. By the time I reached the hotel, my hair was plastered to my forehead and water was squishing in my shoes with every step. The Grandview Hotel stood before me like a fortress of wealth and elegance. Golden light poured from its massive windows, and I could see figures moving inside, shadows of people living lives I could barely imagine. The marble steps leading to the entrance were slick with rain, and I climbed them carefully, feeling more out of place with each step. A young valet, probably in his early 20s, stood under the covered entrance. He was dry and warm in his burgundy uniform, looking at his phone while expensive cars pulled up every few minutes. When he saw me approaching, his expression shifted from boredom to something between pity and annoyance. "Sir, the service entrance is around back," he said without looking up from his phone. "I'm here to pick up my wife," I replied, wiping rain from my face. "She's at the company party." He glanced at me again, taking in my soaked clothes and probably calculating how much I was worth based on my appearance. "Company party's on the 3rd floor, but you might want to," he gestured vaguely at my wet condition. "I'll be fine," I said, moving toward the entrance. That's when everything changed. A black Bentley pulled up to the curb, its engine purring like a contented cat. The valet immediately straightened, suddenly professional and eager. He hurried toward the car, but before he could reach it, another valet appeared and handed him a set of keys. "Hey, driver," the second valet called out, looking directly at me. "The manager's husband wants the car ready. They're heading to the hotel after the party." He tossed the keys at my chest, and I caught them reflexively. They were heavy, expensive-looking, with the Bentley logo gleaming even in the dim light. I stared at them, confusion washing over me like another wave of cold rain. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, but the valet had already turned away to help someone else. I looked at the keys in my palm, then at the Bentley, then back at the keys. My heart started beating faster, but I couldn't understand why. "The manager's husband," he had said. Scarlett was a manager at her company, but I was her husband, and this definitely wasn't my car. The first valet noticed my confusion and walked over. "Problem with the keys, sir?" "These aren't mine," I said, holding them out. He frowned. "You're not here for Mrs. Scarlett's husband. The guy in the gray suit said his driver would be here by 9:30. My mouth went dry. "Mrs. Scarlett?" "Yeah, the regional manager. Real nice lady. Been working here for the party setup all week. Her husband's been great too, very generous with tips." He paused, studying my face. "You okay, sir? You look a little pale." I couldn't speak. The keys felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. Mrs. Scarlett, her husband, the guy in the gray suit. The words repeated in my mind like a broken record, each repetition making less sense than the last. "Where is he?" I managed to ask. "This husband?" "Upstairs at the party, I assume. Tall guy, well-dressed, drives this Bentley." The valet gestured toward the gleaming black car. "Real class act, not like some of the jerks we get here." I stared at the hotel entrance, my mind racing. There was another man at that party presenting himself as Scarlett's husband, someone who drove a Bentley, someone who was well-dressed and generous with tips. Someone who was everything I wasn't. The valet was still talking, but his words sounded like they were coming from underwater. I handed the keys back to him without saying anything and walked toward the hotel entrance on unsteady legs. The doorman, an elderly man with kind eyes, held the door open for me. "Rough night out there," he said sympathetically. "You have no idea," I replied. The lobby of the Grandview was exactly what I expected. Marble floors that reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, the soft sound of a piano playing somewhere in the distance, and the subtle scent of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. I felt like I was tracking mud into a church. I found the elevators and pressed the button for the third floor. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the polished metal surface. I looked exactly like what I was, a working man who had been caught in a storm, out of place in a world of wealth and sophistication. My reflection seemed to be asking me the same question that was echoing in my head. What are you going to find up there? The elevator dinged softly as it reached the third floor and the doors opened to reveal a hallway lined with golden sconces. I could hear the sound of laughter and conversation coming from the end of the hall, along with the soft melody of what sounded like a jazz quartet. I walked toward the sound, my wet shoes squeaking against the marble floor. With each step, my heart pounded harder. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe there was another Scarlett at the company. Maybe the valet had been confused. Maybe I was overthinking everything, but deep down I knew something was terribly wrong. As I reached the entrance to the ballroom, I could see inside through the open doors. The party was in full swing. Men in expensive suits and women in elegant dresses moved around the room like dancers in a carefully choreographed performance. Waiters carrying silver trays weaved between the guests, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than I made in a day. And there, near the far wall, I saw her. Scarlett stood beside a tall man in a perfectly tailored gray suit. She was wearing a red dress I had never seen before, something that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. Her hair was styled differently, more sophisticated than usual, and she was laughing at something the man had said. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the way she looked. It was the way she was looking at him. She had her hand on his arm, the same gesture she used to make with me when we were first dating. The same tilt of her head when she was being flirtatious. The same smile that I thought was reserved for me alone. The man leaned down and whispered something in her ear, and she threw her head back and laughed. It was the laugh I remembered from our honeymoon, from the early days of our marriage when everything was still magical and full of possibility. I stood there in the doorway, water still dripping from my clothes, watching my wife of 22 years act like she was falling in love with someone else. And that's when I realized the valet had been right. There was another man at this party presenting himself as Scarlett's husband. The only problem was I didn't know if I was looking at an imposter or if I was the one who didn't belong. I stood frozen in that doorway for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The sound of the party swirled around me, laughter, clinking glasses, the soft murmur of sophisticated conversation. But all I could focus on was Scarlett, and the stranger in the gray suit who seemed to know her better than I did. My first instinct was to march across that room and demand an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way everyone in that room looked so polished, so confident, so different from me in my soaked work clothes, or maybe it was the growing realization that I might not like the answers to the questions I wanted to ask. Instead, I stepped into the room and tried to blend into the background. It wasn't hard. In a room full of executives and their perfectly dressed spouses, a middle-aged construction worker in wet khakis might as well have been invisible. I positioned myself behind a decorative pillar where I could watch without being seen. The man with Scarlett was everything I wasn't. tall, probably in his early 50s, with silver hair perfectly styled and a confidence that seemed to radiate from every pore. His suit probably cost more than I made in 3 months, and he wore it like he was born to it. "Marcus, you're terrible," I heard Scarlett say, her voice carrying across the room during a momentary lull in the music. Her laugh followed, that musical sound that used to make my day better just by hearing it. Marcus. So that was his name. I watched as he placed his hand on the small of her back, a gesture so intimate and familiar that it made my stomach clench. She didn't pull away. She didn't look uncomfortable. If anything, she leaned into the touch. A waiter approached them with a tray of champagne, and I heard Marcus say, "2 glasses, please. My wife and I are celebrating." My wife. The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the marble pillar so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding or office flirtation. This man genuinely believed he was married to my wife. Or maybe he didn't believe it. Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing. I forced myself to move closer, staying in the shadows but getting near enough to hear their conversation more clearly. A group of other executives had joined them, and I listened as introductions were made. "Have you met Marcus and Scarlett?" a woman in a blue evening gown was saying. "They're absolutely perfect together. High school sweethearts, can you believe it?" High school sweethearts? Scarlett and I had met at a community college when she was 24. We'd been together for 25 years, married for 22 of them. What was she telling these people? "Oh, we're embarrassingly romantic," Scarlett replied, her hand finding Marcus's arm again. "Marcus still brings me flowers every Friday, just like he did when we were teenagers." I felt like I was going to be sick. Every Friday for the past year, I had been working late at the construction site, trying to earn overtime to help with our finances. Scarlett had never complained about the long hours. She'd said she understood we needed the money. Now I realized why she'd been so understanding. She had been spending her Friday evenings with someone else. "How long have you two been married?" another man asked. 3 wonderful years, Marcus replied without hesitation. "Best decision I ever made." 3 years. They were claiming to have been married for 3 years, but I had been married to Scarlett for 22 years. The math didn't add up, unless one of us wasn't really married to her at all. I needed to get closer. I needed to hear more. But as I started to move, I nearly collided with a woman carrying a tray of empty glasses. "Oh!" she exclaimed, steadying herself. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there." Her voice was loud enough that several people nearby turned to look, including Scarlett. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment the world stopped spinning. I expected to see surprise, guilt, maybe even fear in her expression. Instead, I saw something much worse. Annoyance. She said something to Marcus, then started walking toward me, but not with the hurried step of someone rushing to greet their husband. She moved with the measured pace of someone dealing with an unwelcome interruption. "George," she said when she reached me, her voice cool and controlled. "What are you doing here?" The question caught me off guard. What was I doing here? "I came to pick you up," I said. "Remember, we agreed I'd get you at 9 o'clock. She glanced around, seemingly checking to see if anyone was listening. "I told you I'd get a ride home with a colleague tonight." "No, you didn't. I was certain of this. You specifically asked me to pick you up. You said it was important that I meet your coworkers." Scarlett's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You must be confused. And you're wet." "My truck broke down. I walked here in the rain because I thought you were waiting for me." For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Was it guilt? Pity? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Well, as you can see, I'm fine. You should go home and get dry. I'll be home later tonight." She started to turn away, but I caught her arm. "Scarlett, who is that man you were talking to?" "What man?" "The one in the gray suit, Marcus." Her expression hardened. "He's my boss, and you're making a scene." "Your boss? He told people you were married. You're being ridiculous, George. You're tired, you're wet, and you're not thinking clearly. Go home." But I wasn't ready to leave, not when nothing made sense. If he's just your boss, why did the valet downstairs think he was your husband? What valet? What are you talking about? The kid outside. He gave me keys to a Bentley, said they were for your husband. Said the guy in the gray suit was generous with tips. Scarlett's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. You're confused. Maybe you should see a doctor. This paranoid thinking isn't healthy. Paranoid thinking. She was trying to make me doubt my own sanity, and for a moment it almost worked. But I knew what I had heard, what I had seen. "I want to talk to him," I said. "Absolutely not. You're embarrassing yourself and you're embarrassing me. Go home, George, now." There was something in her voice I had never heard before, a hardness, a finality that made it clear this wasn't a request. I looked over her shoulder and saw Marcus watching us. He said something to the group of executives, then started walking in our direction. My heart began racing again. "Is everything all right, darling?" Marcus asked when he reached us. His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of what sounded like an old money accent. Darling. He had called my wife darling. "Everything's fine," Scarlett said quickly. This is George. He works maintenance for the hotel. He was just telling me about a small flooding issue in the lobby." I stared at her in shock. Maintenance for the hotel? She was pretending not to know who I was. Marcus turned to me with a polite but dismissive smile. "Well, I'm sure you'll get that sorted out. These old buildings can be tricky." "I'm not," I started, but Scarlett cut me off. "Thank you, George. I'm sure you need to get back to work." The dismissal was so smooth, so complete, that for a moment even I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. Was I really standing in this elegant ballroom, soaked to the skin, being dismissed by my own wife as hotel maintenance staff? Marcus put his arm around Scarlett's waist and guided her back toward their group. I heard him say, "Poor fellow looked a bit confused. Probably been working too hard." I stood there alone, watching them rejoin the party as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, something that turned my entire world upside down. My wife of 22 years had just pretended not to know me. She had introduced me as hotel maintenance staff and dismissed me like I was a stranger interrupting her evening, and the man she was with, the man who called her darling and claimed to be her husband, seemed to genuinely believe he belonged with her. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them standing in this ballroom feeling sorry for myself. I made my way back to the elevator, my mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. In the lobby, I found the same valet who had given me the Bentley keys. He was still standing by the entrance, now helping guests with umbrellas as they arrived. "Excuse me," I said, approaching him. He looked at me with recognition. "Oh, hey. You find the owner of those keys?" "About that," I said carefully. "The man upstairs, the one with the Bentley. How long has he been coming here?" The valet shrugged. "Marcus, maybe 2 years, give or take. Always comes to these company events with his wife. Real nice couple." 2 years. They had been presenting themselves as a married couple for 2 years. "And you're sure they're married?" "Oh yeah, definitely. She always wears this huge diamond ring, and they're always all over each other. Plus, he tips like a married man trying to impress his wife, if you know what I mean." He grinned. I felt the blood drain from my face. Scarlett still wore her wedding ring at home, the one I had given her 22 years ago, but apparently she had another ring for her other life. "You okay, sir?" the valet asked, noticing my expression. "Fine," I managed, "just fine." But I wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. As I walked back out into the storm, one thought kept repeating in my mind. If Scarlett had been playing the role of Marcus's wife for 2 years, what did that make me? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Scarlett's face when she pretended not to know me. Heard Marcus calling her darling, remembered the valet talking about the married couple who had been coming to events for 2 years. Scarlett came home at 2:30 in the morning. I heard her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in the hallway, then the soft sound of her removing them by the front door. She was trying to be quiet, probably thinking I was asleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her move through the house. She went to the kitchen first. I heard the refrigerator open and close, the soft clink of a glass being set on the counter. Then she came upstairs, her stockinged feet silent on the carpeted steps. She slipped into the bedroom like a ghost, moving carefully in the darkness. I kept my breathing steady and even, pretending to be asleep. I felt the mattress dip slightly as she sat on her side of the bed to remove her jewelry. The sound of her earrings being placed on the nightstand was as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. But tonight there was another sound, the soft metallic click of a ring being removed. Not just any ring, a heavy ring, the kind that would make that particular sound. The diamond ring the valet had mentioned. She slipped under the covers, and I waited for her to say something, anything. An explanation, an apology, even a lie would have been better than the silence, but she simply turned away from me, and within minutes her breathing became slow and regular. How could she sleep? How could she lie there so peacefully after what had happened? I stared at her back in the darkness, this woman I had shared a bed with for over 2 decades, and realized I didn't know her at all. The next morning, Scarlett got up early as usual. I heard her in the shower, then moving around the bedroom getting dressed. Still pretending to be asleep, I watched through half-closed eyes as she went through her morning routine. The same routine she had followed for years: shower, hair, makeup, clothes. But today I noticed things I had never paid attention to before. The way she spent extra time on her hair, styling it more carefully than she did on regular workdays. The expensive makeup I hadn't realized she owned. The clothes in her closet that I didn't remember buying for her. When had she acquired all of these things? And more importantly, how had she paid for them? She kissed my forehead before leaving, the same goodbye kiss she had given me every morning for years. "Have a good day, honey," she whispered, her voice tender and familiar. The hypocrisy of it made my stomach turn. After she left, I got up and went to her side of the closet. I had never been the type of husband to go through his wife's things, but then again, I had never been in this situation before. Her clothes were organized meticulously, as they had always been. But as I looked more carefully, I realized that nearly half of what hung there was new to me. Expensive dresses, designer shoes, jewelry boxes I had never seen before. I opened one of the jewelry boxes with trembling fingers. Inside was the ring the valet had mentioned, a massive diamond solitaire that probably cost more than my annual salary. Beside it was a matching wedding band. Wedding band. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the rings in my palm. They were beautiful, clearly expensive, and completely foreign to me. These weren't anniversary gifts I had forgotten about or family heirlooms I had overlooked. These were wedding rings from another marriage. My hands shaking, I went to Scarlett's dresser and began opening drawers. I told myself I was looking for an explanation, something that would make sense of what I had discovered. But deep down, I think I already knew what I was going to find. In the bottom drawer, underneath a stack of silk scarves I had never seen her wear, I found a manila folder. Inside were documents that made my world collapse completely. Divorce decree, final and absolute. Dated January 15th of 2022, nearly 2 years ago. I read the document 3 times before the words sank in. George Henry Patterson and Scarlett Marie Patterson were officially divorced. The marriage, that I thought was still intact, that I had been living every day for the past 2 years, had been legally dissolved without my knowledge. But that was impossible. I would have known if we were getting divorced. I would have had to sign papers, appear in court, something. You can't divorce someone without their knowledge. Can you? I kept reading, looking for answers. According to the paperwork, I had been served with divorce papers at my workplace on September 20th, 2021. I had supposedly responded through an attorney and agreed to all terms. The divorce was finalized 4 months later on grounds of irreconcilable differences. None of this had happened. I would have remembered being served with divorce papers. I definitely would have remembered hiring an attorney or agreeing to any terms. Unless I thought back to September of 2021. That had been during the Johnson construction project, the biggest job our company had taken on. I had been working 16-hour days, 6 days a week for 3 months straight. I barely remembered that period of my life. I came home exhausted, ate whatever Scarlett had left for me, and fell into bed. There had been a lot of paperwork during that time, insurance forms for the job site, tax documents Scarlett had asked me to sign, refinancing papers for the house that she said would lower our monthly payments. I had signed dozens of documents without reading them carefully, trusting my wife to handle our finances as she always had. Had some of those papers been divorce documents? I found my answer in the next folder, copies of my own signatures on legal documents I had never seen before, but they were definitely my signatures. I recognized the particular way I wrote my name, the slight slant to the letters that had been consistent for decades. Scarlett had somehow gotten me to sign my own divorce papers without my knowledge. I sat on our bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of a legal proceeding I had unknowingly participated in, trying to understand how this could have happened. According to these documents, I had agreed to give Scarlett full ownership of our house, our joint savings account, and her retirement benefits. In exchange, she had agreed not to seek alimony and to pay all court costs. It was a generous settlement from my perspective. Too generous. Why would I have agreed to give up everything? Why wouldn't I have fought for half of our shared assets? The answer was in another document buried deeper in the folder, a psychological evaluation that painted me as an unstable individual struggling with anger management issues and potential substance abuse problems. The evaluation recommended that for the safety of all parties involved, the divorce should be processed quickly and quietly. I had never had anger management issues. I had never abused substances. I had never even raised my voice to Scarlett in all our years of marriage, but according to this document signed by a Dr. Helena Morrison, I was a dangerous man who posed a threat to his wife's well-being. I'd never heard of Dr. Helena Morrison. I had certainly never been evaluated by her. The psychological evaluation was dated October 5, 2021, just 2 weeks after I had supposedly been served with divorce papers. According to the timeline, I had been evaluated, diagnosed as unstable, and deemed dangerous, all within a span of days I couldn't even remember clearly. But the most damning piece of evidence was at the bottom of the folder, a restraining order filed by Scarlett against me on October 10, 2021. The order stated that I had made threats against her life and the lives of her co-workers, and that I was not to contact her directly or indirectly during the divorce proceedings. According to these papers, I had threatened to kill my wife and her colleagues. I had been so dangerous that she needed legal protection from me, and all of this had happened while I was working 16-hour days and coming home to quiet dinners with the woman who was apparently afraid for her life. None of it made sense. But it was all there in black and white, signed and notarized and filed with the county clerk. I was no longer married to Scarlett. I hadn't been married to her for almost 2 years. Every morning kiss, every I love you, every shared meal and conversation had been a lie. While I had been living as her husband, she had been legally free to marry someone else, and apparently she had. I found the marriage certificate in the last folder. Scarlett Marie Patterson and Marcus William Henley, married in a private ceremony on June 18, 2022. 5 months after our divorce was finalized, they had been legally married for over a year. I stared at the marriage certificate until the words blurred together. According to this document, Scarlett had stood in front of an officiant and promised to love, honor, and cherish Marcus William Henley. She had worn a white dress and exchanged rings and vows while I was at home, waiting for her to come back from what I thought was a business conference. I remembered that weekend. She had told me she was going to a 3-day training seminar in Chicago. She had kissed me goodbye on Friday morning and told me she loved me. She had called me Saturday night to say goodnight and tell me she missed me. She had been on her honeymoon with another man. The betrayal was so complete, so methodical that I couldn't process it all at once. This wasn't an affair that had gotten out of hand or a marriage that had slowly fallen apart. This was a calculated plan to erase me from her life while keeping me around as some kind of security blanket or backup plan. But why? If she wanted to be with Marcus, why not just ask for a divorce honestly? Why go through the elaborate charade of forged documents and fake psychological evaluations? The answer was in the final document in the folder. A life insurance policy, taken out on me just 3 months before the divorce papers were filed. The beneficiary was listed as Scarlett Marie Patterson, and the payout was $500,000. $500,000 if I died while we were still legally married. But we had divorced in January. The policy would have become invalid once our marriage was dissolved unless she had never told the insurance company about the divorce. I called the insurance company from my cell phone, my hands shaking as I dialed the customer service number printed on the policy documents. "Hi, I'm calling to check the status of a life insurance policy," I told the representative who answered. I gave her my policy number and social security number. "Yes, Mr. Patterson, I have your account here. How can I help you today?" "I need to know who the current beneficiary is on the policy." "The beneficiary is listed as Scarlett Marie Patterson, your spouse. Is there a change you'd like to make?" "And the policy is still active?" "Yes, sir." "Your premiums are current and the policy is in good standing. The coverage amount is $500,000 as you requested when you opened the policy." I hung up without saying goodbye. Scarlett was still collecting premiums on a life insurance policy that listed her as my spouse and beneficiary, even though we had been divorced for almost 2 years and she was married to someone else. If something happened to me, she would collect $500,000 that she had no legal right to claim. I sat in our bedroom, her bedroom, I realized, surrounded by the evidence of my own erasure, and understood finally what had been done to me. I had been systematically removed from my own life, divorced without my knowledge, and kept around as an unwitting insurance policy. Literally. But there was one thing Scarlett hadn't counted on. I was still alive, I had found the truth, and I was not the weak, confused man she apparently thought I was. It was time to remind her who she was really dealing with. The question was, what was I going to do with what I had learned? And more importantly, what else didn't I know about the life I thought I had been living? I spent the rest of that day making copies of every document in Scarlett's secret files. I photographed each page with my phone, then drove to a copy center and made hard copies of everything. I put the originals back exactly where I had found them, but now I had evidence of what she had done to me. By the time Scarlett came home that evening, I had decided how to handle this. I wasn't going to scream or throw accusations around like some jealous husband. I was going to be calm, methodical, and see just how deep this deception went. She came through the front door at her usual time, 6:30, carrying her briefcase and wearing the same professional smile she had worn for years. "Hi, honey," she called out, her voice bright and cheerful. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied from the kitchen, where I was sitting at our small table with a cup of coffee and the manila folder beside me. "How was yours?" She came into the kitchen, set her briefcase down, and kissed the top of my head just like she had done thousands of times before. But now I noticed things I had missed before, the faint scent of expensive cologne that wasn't mine, the way her hair was slightly mussed despite having been perfectly styled that morning, the subtle smear of lipstick that suggested it had been reapplied recently. "Oh, you know, same old corporate nonsense," she said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a bottle of white wine. "Marcus had us all working late on the quarterly projections. That man never knows when to quit." Marcus. She had just mentioned him casually, naturally, as if he were nothing more than a demanding boss. The audacity of it took my breath away. "Marcus," I repeated. "Your boss." She poured herself a generous glass of wine, then offered the bottle to me. I shook my head. "He's been really pushing hard lately. I think he's worried about the board review next month." I watched her face carefully as she spoke. There was no hint of guilt or deception. She looked exactly like a wife coming home from a long day at work, complaining about her demanding supervisor. If I didn't know better, I would have believed every word. "Scarlett," I said, my voice steady and calm, "I need to ask you something." "Of course." She leaned against the kitchen counter, wine glass in hand, looking relaxed and open. "What's on your mind?" Are we married? She blinked, her smile faltering slightly. What kind of question is that? Of course we're married. George, you're starting to worry me with these strange questions lately. I mean legally married. Right now, today, are we legally husband and wife? Her grip on the wine glass tightened almost imperceptibly. George, what's brought this on? You've been acting so paranoid lately. I reached for the manila folder and placed it on the table between us. I found some interesting documents today. The color drained from Scarlett's face so quickly I thought she might faint. She set her wine glass down with a trembling hand and stared at the folder like it was a snake coiled to strike. Where did you get that? She whispered. From your dresser. Bottom drawer under the scarves. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, something had changed. The warm, familiar woman I had lived with for over 2 decades was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. You had no right to go through my private things, she said, her voice sharp. My private things? I opened the folder and pulled out our divorce decree. This says we were divorced almost 2 years ago. Were you planning to mention that to me at some point? Scarlett stared at the document, her jaw working silently. For a moment I thought she might try to deny it, to claim the papers were fake or that I was misunderstanding something. Instead, she laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that chilled me to the bone. Well, she said, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin, I guess we're finally having this conversation. What conversation? The one where you explain how you divorced me without my knowledge? You signed the papers, George. Your signature is right there. She pointed at the document with a perfectly manicured finger. I didn't forge anything. You tricked me into signing them. You buried them in a stack of other documents when I was working 16-hour days. She shrugged, as if this were a minor technicality. You should have read what you were signing. That's not my fault. The casual cruelty of her response stunned me. This woman who had shared my bed and my life for over 20 years was treating the dissolution of our marriage like a clerical error I should have caught. Why, I asked. If you wanted a divorce, why not just ask for one? Why the elaborate deception? Scarlett picked up her wine glass and took a long sip before answering. Because you would have fought me on it. You would have wanted counseling and mediation and all that ridiculous, let's save our marriage nonsense. This way was cleaner. Cleaner for who? For both of us. She moved to the kitchen island, putting distance between us. George, let's be honest about what our marriage had become. You working construction for $40,000 a year, me climbing the corporate ladder. We were growing apart. We wanted different things. I wanted my wife to be honest with me. Apparently that was too much to ask. Don't be dramatic. Her voice was getting sharper, more impatient. You got the house, I handled all the paperwork, and now we can both move on with our lives. It's better this way. I pulled out the marriage certificate and placed it on the table. Move on with our lives? You mean like when you married Marcus 5 months later? For the first time since I had confronted her, Scarlett looked genuinely surprised. She hadn't expected me to find that document. You've been married to another man for over a year, I continued. While I've been living here thinking I was your husband, you've been playing house with someone else. Marcus gives me the life I deserve, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. He's successful, respected, cultured. He can provide for me in ways you never could. The words hit me like physical blows. I provided for you for 22 years. You provided a roof over my head and food on the table. That's not the same thing. She gestured around our modest kitchen with obvious distaste. Look at this place, George. Look at what our life together was. Marcus took me to Paris for our honeymoon. When was the last time you took me anywhere? When was the last time you told me you wanted to go somewhere? I shouldn't have had to tell you. You should have known. You should have wanted to give me those things. I stared at her, trying to reconcile this bitter, entitled woman with the person I thought I had married. What about the life insurance policy? Her face went pale again. What about it? You're still listed as my beneficiary. $500,000 if something happens to me. Except we're not married anymore, so you have no legal right to that money." Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the counter. When she finally spoke, her voice was deadly calm. "You're going to keep paying the premiums on that policy." It wasn't a request, it was a statement of fact. "Like hell I am." "Yes, you are." She moved closer to me, her eyes hard as stones. "Because if you try to cancel that policy or change the beneficiary or cause any trouble at all, I will destroy you." "You've already destroyed me, Scarlett. What else could you possibly do?" She smiled, and it was the coldest expression I had ever seen on another human being's face. "George, you poor, stupid man. Do you think those divorce papers were the only documents I had you sign? Do you really think I would go through all this trouble without protecting myself?" My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "Remember all those refinancing papers you signed? The ones that were supposed to lower our mortgage payments? Those weren't refinancing papers. Those were documents transferring full ownership of this house to me. You signed away your rights to the only home you've ever owned." I felt the room spinning around me. "That's impossible. I would have had to get the title checked, get an appraisal. All taken care of. Amazing what you can accomplish when someone trusts you completely and doesn't read what they're signing." Her smile widened. "This house is mine, George. Legally, completely mine. I could have you removed from the property at any time." "You can't do that. I have squatter's rights, tenant rights." "Do you? Because according to the legal documents, you've been living here rent-free as a guest of the owner. Me. Guests can be asked to leave at any time." The full scope of what she had done to me was becoming clear. She hadn't just divorced me. She had systematically stripped away everything I owned, everything I had worked for, leaving me with nothing. "But I won't kick you out," she continued, her voice taking on a sickeningly sweet tone, "as long as you behave yourself. As long as you keep your mouth shut about Marcus and our arrangement, as long as you continue to pay that life insurance premium and don't cause any trouble." "You want me to keep living here? While you're married to someone else?" "Why not? You're a good roommate, George. You're quiet, you clean up after yourself, and you don't ask too many questions. Well, you didn't until recently." The casual way she was discussing turning me into some kind of kept pet made my skin crawl. "And what do I get out of this arrangement? You get to keep living in the only home you've ever known. You get to maintain the illusion that your life hasn't completely fallen apart, and you get to avoid the embarrassment of everyone finding out how thoroughly your wife outsmarted you. What if I refuse? What if I tell Marcus the truth about you?" Scarlett's expression turned dangerous. "Then I will make your life a living hell. I'll file a restraining order claiming you've been threatening me. I'll have you arrested for trespassing in my house. I'll tell everyone we know that you've been stalking me since our divorce, that you've been making threatening phone calls, that you're dangerous and unstable. No one will believe that. Won't they? George, you're a 57-year-old construction worker whose wife left him for a successful businessman. That's exactly the kind of man who becomes obsessed and dangerous, and I have documentation of your psychological instability from Dr. Morrison. It would be very easy to convince people that you've snapped. I thought about the fake psychological evaluation in the folder, the one that painted me as angry and potentially dangerous. She had been planning this for years, laying the groundwork to destroy my credibility if I ever discovered the truth. "You're insane," I whispered. "I'm practical," she corrected. "I saw what my life was becoming, and I took steps to change it. You can either accept the new reality and live comfortably, or you can fight me and lose everything. Your choice." She finished her wine and set the glass in the sink, then picked up her briefcase. "I'm going upstairs to change. When I come back down, I expect you to have made your decision. Keep paying the life insurance premiums, keep your mouth shut about Marcus, and continue living here as my house guest. Or pack your bags and see how much fight you have left in you." She started to leave the kitchen, then paused in the doorway. "Oh, and George? If you're thinking about going to Marcus and telling him about our little arrangement, you should know that would be very bad for both of you. Marcus doesn't know about the insurance policy or the house or any of this. He thinks I'm divorced and free to marry him. If he found out I was still financially entangled with my ex-husband, it might make him question other things about our relationship. Are you threatening him too? I'm protecting all of us. Marcus gets to keep his perfect wife, you get to keep your home, and I get the life I deserve. Everyone wins. What about love? What about the vows we took? She looked at me with something that might have been pity. George, I stopped loving you years ago. I just didn't see any point in making both of us miserable by talking about it. This way is better for everyone. Then she walked upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the wreckage of my life spread out on the table before me. I sat there for a long time, staring at the divorce papers and marriage certificates, trying to figure out how I had become a prisoner in my own home, blackmailed by the woman I had loved more than life itself. But as the shock wore off, something else took its place. Not sadness or despair, but a cold, focused anger. Scarlett thought she had checkmated me, that she held all the cards and I had no choice but to accept her terms. She was about to learn that she had seriously underestimated the man she had betrayed. That night, I didn't go to bed. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a stack of bank statements, determined to understand the full scope of what Scarlett had done to me. If she thought she could blackmail me into silence, she needed to know exactly who she was dealing with. I started with our joint checking account, the one we had shared for over 20 years. The balance showed $2,047, which seemed about right for our monthly expenses. But as I scrolled through the transaction history, I began to see patterns that made my blood run cold. Regular withdrawals of $500 every Friday for the past 18 months. Always on Fridays, always exactly $500. Cash withdrawals from ATMs I didn't recognize, in parts of the city I never visited. I did the math. $500 times 52 weeks times 18 months. That was $46,800 that had disappeared from our account in small, regular increments. But that was just the beginning. I logged into our savings account, the one where we had been putting away money for our retirement. The account that should have had $82,000 in it. The balance showed $1,412, $80,000 gone. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the transaction history. The money had been transferred out in larger chunks over the past 2 years. $10,000 here, $15,000 there, always to accounts I didn't recognize. The transfers were all electronically authorized with what appeared to be my digital signature. I had never authorized any of these transfers. Next, I checked our retirement accounts. My 401k from the construction company was untouched. Scarlett didn't have access to that. But our joint IRA, the one we had been funding together for 15 years, had been completely liquidated. $123,000, withdrawn over a period of 6 months and transferred to an account I had never heard of. The early withdrawal penalties alone would have cost us over $12,000. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the magnitude of the theft. Scarlett hadn't just divorced me without my knowledge, she had systematically drained every account we shared, stealing nearly $250,000 that represented decades of careful saving and planning for our future. But she had been clever about it. The withdrawals were spread out over time, small enough individually that they wouldn't trigger any bank alerts, and they had all been made electronically using digital signatures that appeared to be mine. I opened my laptop and began researching digital signature fraud. What I learned made my stomach churn. With the right software and a few samples of someone's signature, it was surprisingly easy to create convincing digital authorizations for bank transfers, and Scarlett certainly had access to plenty of examples of my signature from 22 years of shared financial documents. I needed to understand where the money had gone. I called our bank's customer service line, prepared to spend hours on hold if necessary. "Good evening, Mr. Patterson," the representative said after I provided my account information. "How can I help you tonight?" "I need information about some transfers from my accounts over the past 2 years, large amounts that I don't remember authorizing." "Of course, sir. Let me pull up your account history." There was a pause as she accessed my records. I see several large transfers to what appears to be another account at First National Bank. The receiving account is listed under the name M. Henley Financial Trust. Sir Henley. Marcus Henley. Can you tell me anything else about that account? I'm sorry, sir, but I can only provide information about accounts that you're listed on. Is this your account as well? No, it's not. Then I can't provide any details. However, I can tell you that all the transfers from your accounts were properly authorized with your electronic signature and security codes. What if those signatures were forged? That would be a very serious matter, sir. If you believe there's been fraud on your account, I'd recommend coming into a branch to file a formal complaint. You'll need to bring identification, and we'll need to start an investigation. I thanked her and hung up. An investigation could take months, and in the meantime the money would be long gone, but at least now I knew where it had ended up. In an account controlled by Marcus Henley, the man Scarlett had married. I spent the next several hours digging deeper into our financial records. Credit cards I didn't know we had, with balances totaling over $30,000. A home equity line of credit that had been maxed out at $50,000. Even our car insurance had been changed to a more expensive policy that included coverage I had never requested. Every document showed my forged signature authorizing the changes. By 4 in the morning, I had a clear picture of what had happened. Over the course of 2 years, Scarlett had systematically stolen every penny we had saved together, racked up massive debt in my name, and funneled the money to her new husband. The total amount was staggering, nearly $300,000. $300,000 that represented my entire life's work, gone. But the most infuriating part wasn't the money itself. It was the realization of how long she had been planning this. The first questionable transaction was dated 3 months before she had filed for divorce. She had been stealing from me while still sleeping beside me every night, kissing me goodbye every morning, telling me she loved me. Every interaction we had during that period had been a lie. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of intimacy, all of it had been performance art, while she methodically destroyed my financial future. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed my laptop. Scarlett appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing the silk robe I had given her for Christmas 2 years ago. She looked perfectly composed, as if we hadn't had the most devastating conversation of my life just hours earlier. "You're up early," she said, moving to the coffee maker and starting her morning routine. I couldn't sleep. Guilty conscience? She glanced at me. Over her shoulder, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Something like that. I gestured toward the stack of bank statements on the table. "I've been doing some reading." Her smile faded. "George, we discussed this last night. You need to let this go." "Let what go?" "The fact that you stole $300,000 from our joint accounts." Scarlett's hand froze on the coffee pot. For a moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the soft gurgling of the brewing coffee. "That money was mine too," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "Half of it was yours. What gave you the right to take my half?" "You signed the authorizations. You forged my signature. Prove it." She turned to face me, and her expression was completely calm. "Go ahead, George. File a police report. Claim fraud. See how that works out for you." "You don't think I will?" "I think you're smarter than that." She poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "Do you know what happens when someone files fraud charges against their spouse? The authorities look at everything, every transaction, every document, every aspect of your financial life." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you getting at?" "Well, they'd probably want to know about that cash withdrawal you made in Vegas 3 years ago. The $5,000 you took out of our savings account for your guys' weekend with the construction crew." "I told you about that trip. You said it was fine." "Did I? Because I don't remember giving you permission to spend $5,000 of our money on gambling and strip clubs." "I didn't gamble or go to strip clubs." "Can you prove that? Do you have receipts showing exactly what you spent the money on?" She took a sip of her coffee, watching me over the rim of her mug. "Because if the police start investigating our finances, that transaction is going to look very suspicious. A middle-aged man taking $5,000 in cash to Las Vegas and coming back with no documentation of how it was spent. I stared at her, understanding dawning on me. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've been planning this for 3 years, George. Did you really think I wouldn't cover all the angles? What else? What else what? What other traps have you set for me? Scarlett smiled, and it was the most chilling expression I had ever seen. Remember when you hurt your back 2 years ago? You were off work for 6 weeks collecting workers' compensation? I nodded. I had fallen off a scaffold and injured 2 discs in my lower back. The workers' comp had covered my medical bills and 70% of my salary while I recovered. Except you weren't really injured, were you? I have video of you moving furniture and doing yard work during that time. If the insurance company saw that footage, they might want their money back, plus interest and penalties. I was following my doctor's orders. Light activity was part of my physical therapy. Was moving a refrigerator part of your physical therapy? Because I have very clear footage of you helping the Johnsons move their appliances when they remodeled their kitchen. I felt the walls closing in around me. She had been documenting everything, building a case against me for years. Every small transgression, every minor bending of rules, every moment when I had been less than perfect. She had recorded it all and saved it for exactly this moment. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why go to all this trouble? If you wanted out of our marriage, you could have just asked. Because I wanted it all, George. The freedom to be with Marcus, the financial security I deserved, and the insurance policy of keeping you under control. This way, I get everything I want and you can't do anything to stop me. You can't control people's lives like this. It's not sustainable. Isn't it? You're 57 years old, George. You have no savings, no property, no retirement fund, and a work history that includes several red flags that could make you unemployable if the wrong people found out about them. Meanwhile, I'm married to a successful CEO who adores me and treats me like a queen. She finished her coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. Face reality. You need me more than I need you. The arrangement we discussed last night is the best deal you're going to get. And what happens to Marcus when he finds out the truth about you? He won't find out. You're going to make sure of that. What makes you think I won't tell him everything? Because if you do, I'll destroy both of you. Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. Marcus has no idea about the insurance policy or the house or any of our financial arrangements. If he found out I was still connected to my ex-husband, he'd start asking questions. And if he starts digging into my past, he might discover some things that would be very bad for his career. Such as the fact that some of the money I used to start my new life came from his company's accounts. I felt my blood turn to ice. You embezzled from his company? I borrowed some money that I fully intend to pay back, but if someone wanted to make trouble about it, they could call it embezzlement. How much? Enough that if it came to light, Marcus would be finished. His company, his reputation, his future, all of it would be destroyed. And it would all be traced back to the money he gave me access to as his girlfriend and then his wife. The full scope of Scarlett's plan was finally becoming clear. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had set up Marcus to take the fall for her crimes if anyone ever got too close to the truth. She had positioned herself as the innocent wife who had been manipulated by her criminal ex-husband, while Marcus would be seen as either complicit or incompetent for not catching the theft. You're going to destroy him too, I said. Only if I have to. If everyone behaves and follows the rules I've set up, no one gets hurt. Marcus gets to keep his perfect life, you get to keep your home, and I get everything I deserve. And if someone doesn't follow your rules, then they find out how much trouble I can cause. She picked up her briefcase and checked her watch. I need to get to work. Think about what I've told you, George. You have until tonight to decide whether you want to be smart about this or whether you want to find out how much fight you really have left. She kissed my forehead, the same goodbye gesture she had made every morning for 22 years, then walked out the front door. I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my financial ruin, and realized that Scarlett had made one critical mistake in her elaborate plan. She had underestimated how much a man could hate being backed into a corner, and she was about to learn that when you steal everything from someone, you give them nothing left to lose. I spent that day doing something I'd never done in my 22 years of marriage. I planned my wife's destruction. Not revenge. I wasn't interested in making Scarlett suffer for the sake of suffering, but I was going to dismantle the web of lies and manipulation she had built, piece by piece, until the truth was the only thing left standing. My first stop was Jenkins & Associates, the law firm that had supposedly represented me during the divorce proceedings. According to the documents, a lawyer named Robert Jenkins had advocated for my interest during the settlement negotiations. The receptionist at Jenkins & Associates looked confused when I asked to speak with Robert Jenkins about my divorce case. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Jenkins retired 8 years ago. He hasn't taken on any new clients since 2015. But he represented me in a divorce that was finalized in January of 2022. She checked her computer system, frowning. "I don't see any record of a Robert Jenkins representing anyone by that name. Are you sure you have the right law firm?" I showed her the documentation with the firm's letterhead and Jenkins's signature. She studied it carefully, then called over an older lawyer who had worked with the firm for decades. "This is definitely our letterhead," he confirmed, "but this signature isn't Bob Jenkins. I'd know his handwriting anywhere. We worked together for 15 years. This is a forgery." So Scarlett had forged not only my signature, but also created fake legal representation to make the divorce appear legitimate. The sophistication of her deception was staggering, but it also meant she had committed multiple felonies in the process. My next stop was Dr. Helena Morrison's office, the psychologist who had supposedly evaluated me as unstable and dangerous. According to the psychological evaluation in Scarlett's files, Dr. Morrison had a practice on 5th Street downtown. There was no Dr. Helena Morrison at that address. In fact, the building was a dental office that had been there for over 10 years. I asked the receptionist if she had ever heard of Dr. Morrison. "Never heard that name," she said. "And I've been working in this building for 8 years. There's never been a psychologist's office here." I drove to the state licensing board and asked them to look up Dr. Helena Morrison. After 20 minutes of searching their database, they confirmed what I already suspected. There was no licensed psychologist by that name in the state. The evaluation that had branded me as mentally unstable had been written by someone who didn't exist. But the most important stop was my final one, Marcus Henley's office. Henley Industries occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. The lobby was all marble and glass, with expensive art on the walls and fresh flowers that probably cost more than I made in a week. I told the receptionist I needed to speak with Mr. Henley about an urgent financial matter involving his wife. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Henley is in meetings all afternoon. Can I schedule an appointment for next week?" "Tell him it's about Scarlett and some money that belongs to me. Tell him if he doesn't see me today, he's going to read about this in the newspaper tomorrow." She made the call, and 5 minutes later, I was being escorted to the executive floor. Marcus Henley was exactly what I had expected. Tall, distinguished, wearing a suit that cost more than my truck. His office was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, mahogany furniture, and family photos that included several pictures of him with Scarlett. "Mr. Patterson," he said, extending his hand, "I understand you wanted to discuss my wife. Please have a seat." "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Henley. This isn't easy, but there are some things about Scarlett that you need to know." His expression grew wary. "What sort of things?" I opened the folder I had brought with me and placed the documents on his desk. "These are copies of legal papers showing that Scarlett was married to me for 22 years, divorced me without my knowledge 2 years ago, and married you 5 months later while maintaining financial ties to me." Marcus picked up the documents, his face growing pale as he read. "This says you two were divorced in January of 2022. "That's right. The same month you two started dating, according to what she told your friends at the holiday party. But she told me she had been divorced for 3 years when we met. He continued reading, his frown deepening. These financial documents, this account with my name on it. Where did this money come from? From our joint accounts. Accounts that she emptied over the course of 2 years by forging my signature on electronic transfers. Marcus set the papers down and looked at me carefully. Mr. Patterson, these are very serious accusations, if what you're saying is true. It's all true, every word, but there's more. I told him about the life insurance policy, about the house that had been signed away without my knowledge, about the elaborate web of forged documents and fake professionals that Scarlett had created. With each revelation, Marcus's expression grew darker. She told me the money came from her divorce settlement, he said finally. She said her ex-husband had been financially abusive and that she was entitled to everything. She told you the truth about the financial abuse. She just got the victim and perpetrator backwards. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring out his office window at the city below. Mr. Patterson, assuming everything you've told me is accurate, what do you want from me? I want her stopped, and I want you to know what kind of woman you married before she does the same thing to you. What makes you think she would steal from me? I pulled out the final document from my folder, bank statements I had printed that morning, showing transfers from Henley Industries corporate accounts to the M. Henley Financial Trust. Because she already has. Marcus grabbed the statements, his eyes widening as he scanned the transactions. These transfers, I authorized these for our household expenses, $50,000 over 6 months for decorating our new house, and look at the dates more carefully. He studied the paperwork, and I watched as the realization hit him. These transfers started before we were married, before she even had legal access to our household accounts. She's been stealing from your company for over a year, small amounts transferred to an account she controls, all with forged authorizations bearing your signature. Marcus's hands were shaking as he set the papers down. How much? Based on these statements, about $75,000 so far. $75,000. He said it like he was trying to make the words make sense. She stole $75,000 from my company. And when it gets discovered, and it will get discovered, who do you think is going to take the blame? The CEO who had access to the accounts, or the wife who was supposedly just following her husband's instructions? The color drained from Marcus's face as he understood the full implications. She's set me up. Just like she set me up. The only difference is that you found out before she was finished with you. Marcus stood up and began pacing behind his desk. I need to call our corporate attorneys and our accountants. If there's been embezzlement, there's something else you should know. Scarlett thinks I'm going to keep quiet about all of this. She's been blackmailing me, threatening to accuse me of stalking and harassment if I expose her. Are you going to keep quiet? No, I'm going to the police tomorrow morning to file fraud charges, but I wanted to give you a chance to protect yourself first. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at me. Why? Why warn me instead of just letting this all come out in court? Because despite what Scarlett thinks, I'm not a vindictive man. You didn't know what she was doing. You're as much a victim here as I am. What will happen to her? That depends on what you decide to do. If you press charges for the embezzlement combined with my fraud charges, she's probably looking at several years in prison. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. My God, I was going to make her a signatory on all our accounts next month. She's been pushing for it, saying it would make managing our finances easier. She's been planning to clean you out completely, just like she did to me. We sat in silence for several minutes while Marcus processed everything I had told him. Finally, he looked up at me. What do you need from me to make this right? Nothing. I just need you to know the truth so you can protect yourself. No, I mean, what do you need to rebuild your life? You said she took everything. I can't ask you for money, Mr. Henley. This isn't your fault. But it is my fault, at least partially. The money she stole from you ended up in accounts that I had access to. I may not have known where it came from, but I benefited from her crimes. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. This is my personal attorney. He's going to help you recover everything you lost, and I'm going to make sure you have the resources to start over. I appreciate that, but Mr. Patterson, my wife, my ex-wife, destroyed your life to build hers. The least I can do is help you rebuild what she tore down. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a conference room with Marcus's attorney and a forensic accountant, mapping out a strategy to recover the stolen money and unravel Scarlett's web of fraud. It turned out that when you have unlimited resources and a team of motivated professionals, complex financial crimes become much easier to prove. By the time I got home that evening, Scarlett was already there, preparing dinner like it was any other day. She looked up when I walked into the kitchen, and her smile was warm and familiar. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" "Educational." "Good. I'm making your favorite, pot roast with potatoes. It should be ready in about an hour." I watched her move around our kitchen. Her kitchen, I reminded myself, with practiced efficiency. She looked so normal, so domestic, that for a moment I almost forgot what she had done to me. "Scarlett, we need to talk." "About what?" "About Marcus." Her hand froze on the oven door. "What about Marcus?" "About the fact that I spent the afternoon in his office, showing him all the documents you thought I would never find." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "That's a very bad idea, George. I warned you about what would happen if you tried to cause trouble." "Yes, you did. You threatened to accuse me of stalking and harassment. You threatened to have me arrested for trespassing in your house. You threatened to destroy what was left of my life." "And I meant every word." "I'm sure you did. But there's one thing you didn't consider." "What's that?" "The fact that I don't care anymore. You've already taken everything I had. You can't threaten someone who has nothing left to lose." Scarlett straightened her shoulders, and I saw a flash of the cold, calculating woman who had orchestrated my destruction. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, George." "Actually, I do. You're capable of forging signatures, creating fake legal documents, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and manipulating two men who trusted you. You're also capable of embezzling from your husband's company while setting him up to take the blame." Her face went white. "What did you tell him?" "Everything. About the forged divorce papers, about the stolen money, about the fake psychological evaluation, about all of it. He's meeting with corporate attorneys tomorrow morning to discuss pressing charges." "He won't do it. He loves me." "He loved the woman he thought you were. Once he realized who you really are, that love disappeared pretty quickly." For the first time since I had known her, Scarlett looked genuinely afraid. "You've ruined everything." "No, Scarlett. You ruined everything. I just made sure the truth came to light." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the floor. When she looked up again, there were tears in her eyes. "George, please, we can fix this. We can work something out. I'll pay back the money. I'll tear up the divorce papers. We can go back to the way things were." "The way things were? You mean with you lying to me every day while systematically destroying my life?" "No, thank you. I made mistakes, but we can get past this. 22 years of marriage has to count for something." It did count for something. It counted for enough that I warned Marcus before going to the police. It counted for enough that I'm giving you 24 hours to turn yourself in before the fraud charges are filed. Turn myself in? Tell the police the truth about what you did. Return the stolen money. Accept responsibility for your crimes. If you do that, you might be able to avoid the worst of the consequences. Scarlett stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment when she realized her manipulation no longer worked on me. The tears disappeared, replaced by the cold hatred I had glimpsed the night before. "You think you've won, don't you?" "I think the truth has won. That's all I ever wanted." "Well, congratulations, George. You've destroyed 2 marriages and probably sent me to prison. I hope you're proud of yourself." "I didn't destroy anything, Scarlett. I just stopped pretending that what you built was real." She walked out of the kitchen without another word. 20 minutes later, I heard her car pull out of the driveway. She didn't come back that night, or the next day, or ever again. 6 months later, I was sitting in my own apartment, not large, but paid for with money I had earned honestly. Reading a newspaper article about Scarlett's sentencing. 3 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Marcus had testified at her trial describing how thoroughly she had deceived both of us. The house had been sold to pay restitution to Marcus's company. Most of my stolen money had been recovered and returned to me. I had enough to start over, to rebuild the life that had been taken from me. But the most important thing I had recovered wasn't money. It was my sense of self-worth, my dignity, and my belief that the truth still mattered. For 22 years I had loved a woman who turned out to be a stranger, but I had also learned that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, and that even when someone takes everything from you, they can't take away who you truly are. I was 57 years old, starting over from scratch, and for the first time in years I felt completely free.